so at-risk programs. So we've got people all over the place doing all sorts of things, so it's important that I guess we're all making sure that we're actually heading in the same direction, because there's a potential there for people to go in all sorts of different directions. To ensure our ministry activity is interrelated for effectiveness and sustainability. And so that all of our staff and volunteers understand what you do in the little part that you play on a camp, how that fits into the big picture of what we're all about. And I think that's valuable to know. So, we are engaged primarily on a journey of discipleship. And that's going to look a little bit different on a camp, and it's going to look a little bit different in a school chaplain's context, but we're all part of journeying with young people with an overall mission of actually seeing transformed lives. That's what it's about. And that can be in schools, and it can be in community. And I guess just talking about transformed lives for a moment, because whilst we've already talked about the fact that we're, I guess, evangelistic in nature, we also recognise that as we journey with young people, that we are going to take, some people are going to journey a short way with us, some young people are going to journey a long way with us. For some young people, particularly in a school context, the part that we play in their journey might simply be getting them to actually come to school regularly. We may never get any further than that with some kids, but that's okay. We're journeying with them at least in that step. For some kids, and come on camps or events, they may take a journey that actually gets them to a point where they put their own faith and trust in Christ and become connected to a local church and start growing and contributing to that part of the kingdom in their community. And that's at this end of the scale. So we're talking about journeying with young people on a continuum. Wherever they're prepared to go on that journey, we'll journey with them. We do that, so we journey with them in the everyday, whether it's just a chaplain being a presence in a school every day, or through peak experiences, so like a training week, a cluster camp, which is what you get, a rural or an urban peak experiences to give them relationship skills, to help them cope with life in school so they can hopefully stay in school and continue to be engaged in school as well. And through special events, so specialist camps, I guess, is the big one there that people who develop some take back with. So that's, I guess, part of the journey that we take with young people. All of those things moving towards transforming lives and whatever that looks like for that individual. But we also are partnering with the local church in that. And as much as possible, we want to work with local churches. Most of our volunteers come from local churches. So that's a key part of what we do as well, is making sure we work with churches and communities. And there are a number of churches in this community that are engaged with what we do in all sorts of ways, whether it's being on an LCC or helping run a camp or whatever. So a good number of churches in this community, I can think of about 5 right off the top of my head, who are actively involved in what we do in this area, which is fantastic. Over the years, we've thought about what makes us effective. What are the key elements that actually mean that we actually do get some good outcomes at times? Because if we can identify those, that actually helps us in terms of structuring our programs. So we believe some of the things that make what we do effective are that the gospel is actually presented. Now, as already mentioned, the context is going to be very bit different in a school to a camp. One's more speaking more openly, one's demonstrating Christ's love to people, but we're wanting to be very proactive and conscious that whatever context we're working in, we're actually presenting the gospel, that the kids, either looking at us through the lives that we live or the words that we say, actually get to hear what the gospel's about. So we are dealing with the issues that they're facing day to day. We don't shy away from all of the stuff that happens in kids' lives. We want to engage them on that level and help them walk through some of that stuff. We try to engage them on their turf as much as possible. We don't just set up a program in a church hall or something like that and expect kids to come. We try to go out where kids are, in the schools and so on as well. Already mentioned about the journey of discipleship, so we're on this journey with people. We partner with local churches and hopefully, particularly with our peak experience events like camps, we try to bring that wow factor in as well. So the kids have a good experience. So as well as hearing a little bit about Jesus, they're having a good time. So the whole package is something that is a great and fun experience for the kids as well. Please feel free to stop me too at any time. So these link back into the values of SU Queensland. So the things we value, the transforming power of Jesus, the place of young people in the kingdom, which we mentioned before, holistic ministry. We engage in relational ministry. It's about building relationships and journeying with people. We also want to empower people to their potential in Christ as well. And part of what we'll talk about in a camp context is the whole concept of follow-up as well. If you from a camp experience as young people that have connected well, you've journeyed with over the week and have made a profession of faith, well, we want to make sure that we actually empower them to actually continue to grow in their newfound faith, connect them with local church as well, so that they can reach their potential in their journey with God. And we do that by partnership with local churches and as I've already mentioned, best practice as well. All right. Now, in an ideal world, this is where these different things, I guess, peak. See if I can explain this for you. The red bar, I guess, is where these things link back to the things that we value. So if you look at the everyday here, the everyday ministry that we have, which is primarily school chaplaincy, that is really dealing with young people on their turf and dealing with their issues. The journey of discipleship and partnering with churches and the gospel, that peaks, I guess, in the local church context when we're engaging with people at within churches. And the peak experiences and special events, which is primarily at camps and beach missions, the red bars there, that's the primary place where kids are going to hear and respond to the gospel, and we're going to bring that, I guess, that wow factor fun time into the experience for them. So all of those different events and stakeholders, if you like, including the local church, play slightly different roles at different times along the journey that we are walking with young people, if that makes sense. Come back to me that way if you want me to explain it a bit more later on. It's about real young people as well, so it's fine to talk about all of this stuff in theory. If you look at, let's look at Greg. And I'll put my glasses up here. Greg's a young guy. He loves music, but he's not that interested in God. His journey starts outside both the church and SU activity. His mother hears about a SMAD camp, and because of the strong wow factor, Greg loves music. This is a real life example too, by the way. He goes along to camp. So he had no connection with us. His parents just thought, okay, this kid's into music, there's this SMAD camp, this would be a good place for him to actually, good thing for him to go to. So if it wasn't for SMAD's wow factor, that first critical turning point for him wouldn't have happened. This guy didn't want to go to youth group. He had no reason to connect with a chaplain at school. He wasn't interested in that, but he loved playing guitar. He just loved his guitar. So his mum heard about this camp, sent him on a camp. Now, on this camp, there was a leader called Dave who went to one of the local churches in the area where this camp was running. He loved playing guitar as well. Was a really good guitarist. But he was also very focused on ministry and working with young people. And Dave, as the leader, and Greg made the connection at this camp because they both loved guitar. They spent a bit of time together learning about some guitar stuff. I'm a guitarist, so whatever that looks like. And they had a very short but powerful journey on the course of that SMAD camp. So they spent some time together in this peak experience. At the end of that journey, Dave, who was the leader, invited Greg to come along to his youth group. And he did. Because of the fact that he got on so well with Dave, that was the trigger for him to go on to youth group. This guy's a good guitarist, this guy's playing music on Sunday morning or whenever, or a youth group. I'm going to go and hang out with Dave because he's pretty cool, and we can hang out and play guitar together. And now, or at the time this was written, Greg has a growing interest in who Jesus is, what this whole church thing is all about, and has starting to take this journey. Over a period of time, he actually comes to his own faith journey and understands who Christ is and makes that connection with Christ himself and starts on his own journey with God, which is the outcome that we're looking for. So in this context, you can see how those different events and those partnerships have actually worked together to make a difference in Greg's life. That's, I guess, a really good example of what we're actually about and what we're trying to achieve by the programs that we run. So that's a little bit about who we are and what we do, and hopefully that's been helpful for you to understand who this group is that you're actually coming to connect with and volunteering for. Session number 1, that's it. Any questions of anything that I've actually mentioned here so far?
Excuse me, boss. You have a text message.
I'm very popular this morning.
You are. No? Awesome. You've got some fact sheets there that I've going to form part of a bundle of papers that I'll give you this morning. So I encourage you to have a read of that as well, and just to refresh about who we are. Session 1. Okay. All right. If we have a look now, get up and stretch your legs if you want to. This is only a one-page line for the next one. Three there. The focus of what we're about here this morning is, I guess, what does it mean to be a leader on an SU camp? What does that look like? And what are we actually asking you to do? Which is good to know. All right, I'm going to start off here. Actually, I'm not going to start off here. I'm going to show a little clip to you now. I'm sure we've all seen Toy Story. Anyone here haven't seen Toy Story? The movie Toy Story? Excellent, that's good. We're going to watch a short clip, and it's Woody. Woody in the bedroom, Andy's bedroom, and he is the leader of the room. Okay, this is his turf, he's the boss, and he is, I guess, in charge of what's going on. He's the leader. What I want you to do, as you watch this little short clip, I want you to brainstorm, I guess, some ideas and look for some of the things that Woody is doing that actually demonstrate good leadership, or you might see something that demonstrates poor leadership as well. So I'm going to start that off. Hopefully we've got the sound. That's the wrong one. This is the one.
Pull my string of birthday parties today. Okay, everybody, coast is clear. Ages 3 and up, it's on my box. Ages 3 and up. I'm not supposed to be babysitting Princess Drool. Hey, Ham, look, I'm Picasso. I don't get it. you scared? Tell me honestly. I was close to being scared then. Oh, I'm going for fearsome here, but I just don't feel it. I think it's coming off as annoying. Oh, hi, Bill. Hi.
I wanted to thank you, Woody, for saving my flock.
Oh, hey. It's nothing.
What do you say I get someone else to watch the sheep tonight?
Hell yeah.
Remember, I'm just a couple of blocks away.
Come on, going up front. Hey, Woody, come on. Oh, thanks, Michael. Okay, oh, good. Hello, check, that better? Great. Everybody hear me? Up on the shelf, can you hear me? Great. Okay, first item today. Oh yeah. Has everyone picked a movie, buddy?
Good, buddy. You can't be serious.
Well, I didn't know we were supposed to have one already. We have to hold hands. You guys think this is a big jump. We've only got 1 week left before the move. I don't want any toys left behind. A movie buddy. You don't have one? Get one. Alright, next. Oh yes. Tuesday night's plastic corrosion awareness meeting was, I think, a big success, and we want to thank Mr. Spell for putting that on for us. Thank you, Mr. Spell. Okay. Oh yes, one minor note here. Andy's birthday party has been moved to today. Next party today. His birthday's not till next week.
What's going on down there? Is his mom losing her marbles?
Well, obviously, she wanted to have the party before the move. I'm not worried. You shouldn't be worried.
Of course, Woody ain't worried. He's been Andy's favorite since kindergarten.
Hey, come on, potato head. If Woody says it's all right, then well, darn it, it's good enough for me. Woody has never steered us wrong before. Come on, guys. Every Christmas and birthday we go through this.
Okay, it's another dinosaur. A little one. I just don't think I can take that kind of rejection.
And listen, no one's getting replaced. This is Andy we're talking about. It doesn't matter how much we're played with. What matters is that we're here for Andy when he needs us. That's what we're made for, right?
Pardon me, I hate to bring up the staff meeting, but they're here! Birthday gifts and people!
Meeting adjourned.
Oh boy, can you take a look at all those presents?
I can't see a thing.
Yes, sir, we're next month's garage sale fodder for sure.
Any dinosaur-shaped ones?
Oh, for crying out loud, they're all in boxes, you idiot.
Hey, there's a nice little one over there. All right, all right. If I send out the troops, will you all calm down? Yes, we promise. Okay. Send your batteries.
Yeah, very good, buddy. That's used the old dude.
All right. What do you think? What are some of the leadership qualities that Woody was demonstrating?
Delegation.
Delegation. Yep.
Encouragement.
Encouragement. What else?
Preparation.
Preparation. He was prepared. Point five. Anything else you can think of?
He listened.
You listened.
They didn't just have his own agenda. He
Yeah.
listened to what others were saying.
There's a mentality like he wasn't stressed.
To maintain like a positive approach.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It was also leading from a position of relationship, wasn't it? He'd got good relationships with all of the other toys. You could see that from some of the brief interactions he had with different ones there. He knew them, he knew what their concerns were, and he was able to lead off the basis of that relationship. Any other ideas?
He was confident, he knew his role.
In his role? He did.
And he didn't have all the answers.
No, you didn't have all the answers, did you? No, very good. All right, let's have a look at some of these. And you pick up on some of them now, right? Preparation. When you go on a camp, if you've never been on a camp before, you'll get tired. You've got to keep kids entertained and engaged for a week, and you probably run on sleep. So there's some things that we can do to actually make sure we're prepared. So there's different ways that we can encourage you to actually prepare for coming on camp, and the most important one I think is actually spiritual preparation. So we're actually engaging in business. It's about expanding the kingdom of God and journeying with young people on a process of having them understand who Jesus is and what he means for their life. So we're actually engaged in a spiritual activity, and there may even be spiritual elements that don't want us to achieve some of those goals. So it's really important as a leader going on a camp where you're actually engaging with kids about spiritual issues to make sure that you are, preparing yourself spiritually as you prepare for camp. So really encourage you to, get into the Bible in the lead up to the camp as well. And make sure you're really building that connection with God personally before you get there. Praying for the actual event that you're going on. So, praying for one another as leaders, praying for Andrew as the director as he leads this camp for the week. And the participants as well. You may or may not know who's coming, but you can start praying for the kids that are actually going to be coming along in that week as well, that they will be safe, that they'll have a good time, but that something about what is being modelled and something that is being said might connect with them, and they might actually think, well, okay, maybe there's something to this God thing, and it's something I want to explore while I'm here this week. Really encourage you to let other people know in your perhaps church what you're doing this week, so that other people can also pray for you. So whether it's family or your youth group or your home group or your church, that's something that we really encourage you to do. So that's the first way in which we can prepare ourselves spiritually. I think it's probably the most important in many ways. The second is physical. It's a bit hard to do the hard slog of a week of camp if you're not well. And sometimes, we can't help that. That's just what happens. But just really encourage you in the lead up to camp to make sure you're well rested and you're looking after yourself before you go. It's going to be a hard enough slog as it is, I guess. You're on the back foot if you are burning the candle at both ends for 3 or 4 days a week leading up to it as well. It's going to make it challenging for you to actually last the distance. Mental preparation. Really encourage you to know your role in the program, and I don't know what the nature of the camp meetings that Andrew's been having are, but really, if you've got a role to play within the camp, really encourage you to understand what your role is, so that you can be the best support to your leaders and help everything to go smoothly. Make sure you're actually equipped and understand what it is that you've been asked to do on the camp. If there's an element of the program, for instance, that you've been given to look after, if there's something about that you don't understand, make sure you're asking questions so that you actually do get a good picture of what it is that you're actually doing while you're there as well. Make sure that you are confident with, understanding the gospel, but probably more important, understanding your own testimony. One of the reasons that we tell stories in what we do, the story of Greg, for instance, earlier, is that stories are very powerful. It's actually, nobody can argue with your own experience. Whereas if we're coming from a position of always just talking about this is what the Bible says, this is what we believe, which are great things to do, sometimes that just doesn't have the same impact with some kids. It's actually saying, you know what, this is my experience, this is what I was going through, this is the difference that Jesus has made in my life, and this is my experience of actually walking that journey, and that can perhaps be part of your experience as well. So actually have a bit of a preparation in mind about your own story, your own spiritual journey, so that you can actually share that with kids, because that will have a big impact as well. And lastly, you need to, I guess, come there with a good attitude. You need to be able to show love and respect to the participants, your team members, your leaders as well. Camp is going to be go far smoother if you're there ready to go with a positive attitude, you're cooperating with everybody around you, and you're not making life difficult for other people. And that's, I know that's common sense, but sometimes that sort of happens because people come along thinking it's actually about themselves and what they get out of this week, rather than focusing on, what I'm here to serve, and I'm here for the kids that are coming, and that's my focus. But above all, go expecting to have fun, and also go expecting to see God do some stuff, because He inevitably does when we put ourselves in these positions and we actually open ourselves up to being used by Him to speak into other people's lives. He inevitably shows up and does something that we don't expect that He might do, and that's exciting. An exciting place to be as well. All right. Okay, what are we looking for in terms of a leader? Firstly, as I've already mentioned, you're there to serve the participants. Okay, so the camp is not about you. You're actually there as a servant to the kids that are coming there. A good leader will work in harmony with the vision and mission that we've already talked about. You'll work well with the leadership team to achieve the goals of the program. A good leader will model that servant leadership. If you see something that needs to get done, even if that might not be part of what you think the role is, sometimes you just need to step in and do something so that the program can keep running and the kids can continue with their engagement in the program. And a good leader is someone who's concerned with the well-being and holistic growth of the participant. Part of our philosophy of holistic ministry that we talked about earlier is the fact that we're actually journeying with kids on their life's journey and bringing and hopefully wanting to see transformation in their lives. The kids aren't a project for us to convert, and I think we've got to be careful in terms of how we approach it sometimes. If we just come in with the viewpoint that my job here is to get them across a line, I think we're missing the point a little bit, because some kids will come to that and some kids won't. But our job is actually to journey with them. So we're concerned not just whether they will ultimately make a decision, although that's what we would love to see happen. We're actually going to care for them, and we're going to care for the whole person. So we're going to make sure they're fed properly. We're going to make sure they get the rest they need, they take a shower, that they're engaging well with other campers and not getting left out on the fringe, and all of those types of things that are part of making sure we're looking after the holistic well-being of the participants that are there as well. You've got a role in helping to prepare and run the program in accordance with state policies and practices, and Andrew will talk about some of those in your camp meetings. You need to be willing to undergo training, and that's why you're here today. Have a look at those things. And really important, as well as being well rested, it's really important that you actually go along with a sense of humour, because some kids are going to rub you the wrong way. Some other leaders might rub you the wrong way as well. And there will be all sorts of different things that pop up that can be frustrating. Programs don't go well, dinner's not ready, all sorts of things. You've got to maintain a sense of humour and be able to roll with what's happening, laugh it off, and make sure you're continuing on in that vein as well. And I guess a really important little point, you can impress from a distance but impact from up close. The level of relationship that you build with the campers, the deeper and closer the relationships that you're able to develop, the more opportunity you'll have to actually make an impact in their life. Yes, they will be watching you from a distance even if you're not engaging with particular individuals, but the ones that you can build good connections with, you'll be surprised at the impact you can make on a kid simply by walking the journey with them for a week. I'm going to hand everyone out one of these. This is our little present to you, apart from the handouts. SU Queensland is part of the SU Australia, and we have developed over the years this Child Safe program. Legislation now requires that any body, non-for-profit body that works with kids have to have some type of child safety program to, I guess, govern the way that they interact with kids. Churches have to have it, Scripture Union has to have it, all sorts of other organisations as well. So you may have come across this in part of your church training, I don't know. A lot of denominations use our material for their child safe training. But this is a little booklet that is put together. There's standards in there, some little case studies and that type of thing that sort of unpack for you how you can react and what you need to do in certain situations. So we'll be referring to this a little bit today, just in pieces, but really encourage you to have a good flick through this, hang on to it, and it's a really good resource to hang on to. Alright, what I want you to do first of all is turn to page 16. I just have a look at what page 16 is, because mine isn't on the version. I'm not sure it's still there. Yep, that's it. Alright. Okay, if we have a look on page 16, there's a whole lots of do's and don'ts there that we're going to very quickly flip through. They're going to be on the screen as well, but just alerting you to the fact that you've got them in this booklet as well. So these are some of the things that you need to do in regards, code of conduct governs the way we practice and things we do while we're on camp. So these are some of the things that you need to do. Okay, you need to behave in a manner consistent with your position. So you're not another child, you're not a peer of the kids. You have to behave in a manner that I guess is fitting with the role that you have within the camp. So if you're an assistant leader, that'll mean something different than if you're a leader. If you're the director, if you're the camp parents, it's really about understanding what your position is and making sure you're operating in a manner that's consistent with the role you've actually got. You need to follow safety policy and guidelines, and we'll talk a little bit about those later on, but each activity that you'll do on camp, you should, before you engage in activity, you should actually understand what the rules are, what the safety considerations are for the activities that you're undertaking, and Andrew should be basically able to tell you what that is. You do have to treat all children and young people with respect. Sometimes that's easier for some kids than others, depending on how they're behaving at a particular point in time. But you're a leader, you're there as somebody who has a duty of care to the kids that are there, so you need to treat them with respect. You need to allow children to determine the degree of physical contact. Okay? This is going to vary depending on the age of the kid and the context. We live in a society where, unfortunately, because of abuse situations and that type of stuff, we have to be very conscious about the way that we actually interact physically, with kids. Obviously, the younger the child, you have to take that into context. But can I guess, outline perhaps what some appropriate things are? We don't want to have no contact with kids. Right? It'd be very sad if we ever got to the day where it was a completely hands-off policy, because kids need, it's part of them understanding they're valued and they're cared for if there's a physical contact actually happening. So what I would suggest is, if you're going to hug somebody or a child wants a hug, that Tim, isn't it? I'll just demonstrate with you. You're a bit taller than this, it's probably not. I mean, what we say, you don't want to do a full-on bear hug, okay, with people you don't really know, but a side-on hug like this. How you going, Tim? Yeah. Going all right, mate? Yeah. Okay, that's an appropriate way to hug. If you are wanting to get somebody's attention, sit down there, mate, that's fine. you know, a touch, an arm or a shoulder is fine. Here you go, Tim. You all right? Okay. Upper arm, shoulders, okay. Wouldn't go any further down like that. That's a safe place to have physical contact. One of the other things that when I was teaching, we were made aware of that. I actually reckon the safest place to touch somebody, if I can again, is in the middle of the back here, because it furthest away from any other areas that might be deemed inappropriate for all sorts of reasons. So, as I said, you've got to understand the age of the child involved, and actually letting the child dictate what level of physical contact they're comfortable with as well. So, good general rule of thumb is don't initiate physical contact unless it's being initiated first. And if a kid comes up and wants to give you a big front-on hug, it's actually pretty simple just to go like this and swing around and you know, sometimes you're not going to be able to react quick enough, but it's really just a matter of being conscious of how you're actually engaging in that way. Does anyone have any questions about that? Because I think that's an important issue. Or any other suggestions or thoughts about other types of contact that you might have? We're all good?
What about the kids' contact with each other?
Yeah, good question. Again, it's probably not something you want to make a big deal out of in terms of making it an issue that's bigger than what it needs to be. But we also have to be mindful of the fact that some kids won't like it, and if you observe that there's physical interaction happening and certainly one kid's uncomfortable, you might just need to have a word. Look, Timmy doesn't actually feel comfortable when you give me a good hug. How about you just slap him on the back as a way of saying, oh, give him a high five or something like that. So I would be, look, if it's, I think you'll know within yourself if it's a problem. If it's something that you see that you are uncomfortable with, then I would probably suggest that just keep an eye on it. It might be a one-off, it might not happen again, and you may just need to intervene and just explain to the kids, look, you know, we all have different ways of expressing that we actually care for one another. Some people respond differently to that, and actually just talk about some of the things that we've just talked about today. So how about you just give them a big hug on the shoulder, or give them a high five, or whatever else. So it's really just trying to divert a little bit in terms of what they're doing. Yeah. Great point though. You have to be very conscious of the male-female thing, obviously. That's probably more of a concern. If you notice that, you probably want to step in earlier. Part of the challenge is we actually don't know the background often of what some of these kids have gone through. So some of these kids, you know, the prevalence of physical and emotional and sexual abuse that happens in our communities is actually, you know, fairly significant. And you never know what these kids have gone through, and either even before they left, the day before they left the camp, or you know, in years or months previously. So that's why you just got to be conscious of. And you can usually pick up pretty quickly if a kid's not comfortable. It's very difficult to hide that reaction.
Yeah, sometimes too, like when, depending on age, like depending on how things are at home, especially if the child's not getting a lot of attention, sometimes they come to camp and they might just like attach themselves to you, so like they'll sort of run up and give you a big hug and they're sort of like, you know, you're trying to shake them off the leg kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I've sort of seen that happen.
Yeah, again, it's like
sometimes, because you don't sort of want to reject the child,
no,
but you sort of really need to know those boundaries too.
Absolutely right. And sometimes it might be, you know, things will happen so quickly sometimes that you can't control. So, you know, what we've got to be conscious of is our reactions and our responses. Certainly, I'd say don't sit kids on your lap. Okay, I think there's whole lots of issues associated with that. But you know, I'd be just very conscious of making sure you're in a public place. If a kid runs up in a public place and goes like this, well, everyone around knows that, okay, it's not something that's initiated, but it might be like, yeah, you're going all right today. How are you going? You know, pushing them off. You know, you just got to roll with that. You know, turning and you put the arm around. I mean, obviously, if it becomes a really, really big problem, then, you know, depending on the age of the child, and, you know, it may just be, hey, I really enjoy spending time with you, but you know what? I feel more comfortable if we did this. How about we do this, give each other a high happy with that? Good, let's go and do this activity together. And try and be positive and encouraging, but perhaps just divert it. But again, we're always going to be put in a situation. Preschool teachers have this all the time, with the littlies, they just want to give them a hug and they jump on their lap and all sorts of things. And we've got to roll with that to a degree.
We had a great one boy do it to the cricket coach after school this week, where he just latched onto his leg. The cricket coach had no idea what to do with him and how to get him off. And so we sort of had a chat with him. It was only about 5 minutes later, and just did the same thing. He just jumped on his leg and held onto his leg and wouldn't let go.
Like some kids just want attention.
Absolutely, you're right. And look, again, it's just, I can't give you a hard and fast rule for every circumstance. It's just a matter of being conscious, I think, more than anything. If we're conscious of it, I think we'll end up, we know how we're going to appropriately respond most of the time.
Make a small contact with another leader and go,
Help!
assistance. A bit of a look.
Yeah. But I mean, that is actually a good point. You probably want to make sure you're manoeuvring the situation so that you're not actually in a spot where nobody else can see you interacting with a child, particularly a child of the opposite sex, or any child for that matter. But you always want to make sure there's line of sight, that you're in a room, and that you're not alone with a 13-year-old girl in an isolated sports shed getting gear out. I mean, that's just sounds horrible that you've got to think through that issue, but that's just the reality of the world we live in. I've seen, I know of cases firsthand where 12, 13, 14-year-old girls have made completely fabricated allegations against somebody who was in a camp environment actually serving kids, and just mud sticks, doesn't matter, and complaints have to be followed through. And I've had a number of occasions where I've had to follow through those types of complaints with people, and it's a devastating thing. And generally speaking, it's completely innocent. But that's the reality of where we're at. We've just got to be conscious of it. We need to make sure we're reporting abuse allegations or suspicions. So we have an obligation that if something is disclosed to us that would constitute abuse, you need to let your camp director know. We'll look at some of those profiles later on. Simply because we have mandatory reporting legislation in Queensland that we're obligated to report those types of things. As I was, just be aware of gender issues, and we've talked a little bit about that. And anything at all that you might have a concern with, or something doesn't look right or feel right, or a kid makes a really funny comment and you think, well, where did that come from? It's not quite right. Report all those things back to your leader. Just for your own benefit, so you're covering yourself, okay? It can be noted and documented. It can be followed through if it needs to be. Some of the don'ts. Don't engage in rough physical activity. Again, because of that physical contact issue. Now, that's not to say you don't play footy with the boys or things like that, but again, just be mindful. Leaders are generally bigger and stronger than kids. You don't want injuries, you don't want anything. You don't want to initiate a method of contact that will perhaps spill over into other activities. So again, it's just being aware of those types of things. Don't use any physical means to control or discipline the child. At the same time, if a child's standing in front of a bus that's coming towards them, you'll grab them and pull them out the road. But if you're having a discipline issue or something like that, don't touch the kid. You've got to try and talk them down or whatever else. Don't restrain them. Unless they're putting themselves and other people in harm's way, you've really just got to let it be and try and work it through with other methods. There is a thing in school context where you can use reasonable physical force to diffuse a situation if you believe there's a threat of harm to the child or others. that same guideline I don't believe applies outside of the school context. So our context or a church context, I don't believe that same those same guidelines apply. And even then, if that happens in a school context, there's all sorts of reports and investigations and all sorts of stuff that that you have to go through. And again, I've seen teachers who've been literally had their reputations ruined and destroyed because they've been confronted with this dangerous situation and they've had to physically restrain somebody. And there's all sorts of ramifications from that aren't particularly pleasant. So, don't hold, kiss, cuddle or touch inappropriately. Make sexually suggestive comments. Do things that the child can do themselves. So, if a child's capable of feeding themselves, dressing themselves, all of those types of things, participating in an activity without assistance, you need to let them do those things themselves. Don't go into the sleeping accommodation of the opposite gender. Fairly common sense. Spend time alone with the child. Take a child to your house. We'll talk about follow-up right at the end, but that's again not a good scenario to put yourself in. All right. Okay, just very quickly, we might have a group of three here. Actually, I'll split you guys up. Hey, guys and girls. Let's do a guys and girls little group. Just very quickly, want you to have a very quick discussion in 2 minutes about what are some things that you yourself can actually personally do to prepare for camp. So whether that's spiritual, physical, whatever. Just have a very quick discussion about, from here, what are some things that you're going to do to actually prepare yourself for camp in a couple of weeks.
Otherwise, they'll be not jumping in a ball.
I've just got those 4 points there for you as well.
She's in a different
All right. Any feedback? What are some of the things that you think you might do between now and camp to actually prepare yourself?
You need to find a small window of time to forget life, calm, and prepare the mind.
Yep.
You also need to pray for rain.
All right.
Yep. Prior to the camp, so there's plenty of water.
Okay.
That'll be 11 tanks, we're down to 2 with water in them.
Oh, okay. Okay. Fair enough. We need to do that. Anything else?
Our main emphasis was on God, you know, like the spiritual aspect, put God first.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I think that includes like having people pray for you, those kinds of things. And then the rest of it, you know, if you put God first, I think the rest of it will come into place, especially the mental and the attitude.
Yeah.
But not like in everything in life, if you got God first, everything should filter down.
Even your physical will come into play because, you know, the word says, you know, he will give us rest.
Awesome. All right, guys. That's the end of session number 2. 5 to go. The next one is probably the big one with a lot of information about child safety and those types of things. So I don't know if you want to stretch your legs or whatever.
I need to find a loo.
Find the
Do
loo.
you know what it is?
No?
So if you go out into the hallway,
Yes.
there's 2 doors on the right hand side.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Do you want hot chocolate? How many sugars do you want? Okay, cups. And that's really nice to cup.
Does that say watch out for the truck?
Yeah.
I was like trying to figure out what the.
So that's our
Very
deputy
small.
principals. And they used to extra teacher to a dance excursion because somebody was away. And so then they did this series of 5 up, and that's the only one they've kept.
That's good.
Whose face is it?
Deputy principal.
Stuart Taylor.
It's a nice campus here, isn't it?
It is a campus. It's
They
not
have
just a
one of
school,
these.
it's a campus.
You have to take advantage of that government funding when it's there.
Yeah.
Might not always be there.
That's right.
So I think these guys are definitely taking advantage of it.
Yeah. Mind you, I mean, it's a process to get.
Besides that.
Usually you have to have the money to put in to do it too.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. Yeah. Since I've started working in Christian schools, I've actually on the board of 2 different schools. I'm actually on the board of Cleveland Christian College now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so yeah, I've seen how the process works from both sides.
Yeah, the other way, I was on the board before I went to staff there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how's Happy going? Is it back good these days or not?
Yeah, look, she's doing alright. We had she had a diagnosis for about 5 years of rheumatoid arthritis condition. Because obviously it got quite severe in the last 2 years when we took the blood later shop work to look after her and Chelsea.
Because I took your job.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Now you mentioned that. Yeah. So no, she's working as a swim teacher now these days. Does a few shifts, but they diagnosed her with what they call negative factor rheumatoid arthritis, which is basically we've done all the tests, we can't find evidence of anything else. The symptoms say rheumatoid arthritis, so we'll call it rheumatoid arthritis.
Yeah.
It was still not really, nothing was really helping. We had a chance encounter with a doctor up in Townsville. Because really was showing some signs of things that we could work out what's the matter with him. In the end, it turned out to be like a psychosomatic and stress related, and the more we couldn't find something, the worse it got. So, until our paediatrician flew up and said, "We're fine, I don't see any noise, better overnight," which is funny. But as part of the testing in that, they wanted to do some nerve conduction studies on him, and he was a bit freaked out by it. So they said, we'll do it on Mum first, and they did. And they thought, oh, some funny readings here. So they ended up putting her into the system as well, and it ended up having a diagnosis of, it's called Charcot-Marie-Tooth, for hereditary sensory motor neuropathies. But basically what it is that the peripherals of the nerves, so like hands and feet, the sheath on that side of the nerves actually gets eaten away, so you lose nerve function from your peripherals, and it progresses. The medication she was on for rheumatoid arthritis was actually exacerbating the condition, which is why we couldn't sort of ever seem to get a handle on it. And so, yeah, pretty cluey doctor that sort of spotted that, and so she's on other medication now. It's actually not doing too bad, but it's a you can't reverse the process, and there's no cure for it or anything like that. It's just managing the symptoms. So it's under control enough that she can work. Do a bit of part-time work, and she does have the swim teacher, which is probably one of the best case scenarios because she's exercising in water. So it's probably the way that it's worked out. I wasn't planning about that. It's probably one of the best forms of therapy for her anyway. And she gets paid for it. So it's like doing a little aerobic stuff.
How much does she get paid to do swim teaching?
It's about $20 an hour, something.
Because I currently don't about funding stuff.
Yeah.
And they're a bit short on instructors. And so I was looking at that, it's $400 to do the first part of the Osprey course, and then there's all these other sections that are about the same. I said, well, it's actually worth it once you actually do it, you get paid a decent amount.
Yeah, look, it depends on the swim school. Other ones she's taught out to be $18, $19. I think the most she's got is about 23. I think the one she's at now is probably the most generous that she's at.
You know, it's supposed to be this stuff's a lot.
Sorry, I'm late.
Hello. I didn't know you were coming to the training today.
Yes, I was coming. I was a little bit sick, so yeah.
What you did last year though?
Can I grab one of the booklets from you guys to get to know?
This is my first.
I'll get you to sign in. I'll give you that. We've already done the first two sessions, which the first session is all about SG and who we are, so that's not a big deal. And the second one is just about being the leader of the team, the parents. So I'll give you those, and we're just about to start session number 3.
Okay, thanks, Gavin.
And if you want to pull one of these chairs around to see the screen, or wherever you want to stand, that's fine. Do you know the other people in the room here?
Kirsten.
You know Kirsten? This is Tim
Tim, how are you?
and Sarah. Yeah, this is Dave. And Dave.
Hey, Dave.
Dave's
Good
wife,
lady.
Nikki, is here somewhere too.
Excellent. Very good.
So we're
Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah.
just about to start session 3.
3.
And there's 7 sessions.
You need to take notes.
Notes are provided for you. Up to you if you want to scribble on them or whatever.
Gavin, Andrew talked to you about me having to go earlier to have a meeting with them.
That's fine.
Yeah,
Yep, that's fine. I mean, if you just want to grab the handouts. There's also an assessment sheet. So if you wanted to take that, and it's an open book, it doesn't matter how long. It's just almost a demonstration to see where you're at. So if you want to take one of those and fill it out and just shoot it back to me, that's fine. All right. I'm going to keep going because I'm conscious that it's a Saturday and we all got other places we probably want to be. What we're really looking at in a little bit more detail in this session, and this is probably the one that really does focus in on the whole child safe aspect. So why are we looking at child safe training? Question for you. Why do we need to look at this?
We need to look after these children.
We need to look after these
We don't want
children.
them going home with broken arms.
Well, it doesn't take, too much opening the newspaper to understand that interactions with children and, the mistreatment of children is a big news item. It creates enormous amounts of angst and publicity and everything else through the community, because obviously we've got a duty of care to kids, so make sure we're looking after them properly, keeping them safe, and protecting ourselves as well, which is really important. As mentioned earlier, I've dealt a number of times with adults that have either been a victim of malicious complaints or done some really dumb things that have put themselves in situations that, their reputation is questioned. So Child Safe, the little booklet that you've got there, as I mentioned earlier, is a system that we have developed nationally to look at child safe issues. It's used by us, it's used by a number of Christian ministry organisations, it's used by a number of denominations. It's about making sure we have safe people on camp, so you guys as leaders, making sure we're confident that we've got people in there who are safe, who understand what it means to be safe, and we have safe activities as well, so that we can engage in good, fun activities with kids, but do it in a manner that's safe, and when things happen, we know how to appropriately respond to those situations as well. So we have a whole system in place, and you as a team member fit into that process. So team member, you guys, is anyone who engages in a responsible role within SU Queensland, so whether that's a volunteer, like some of you guys are on a camp, or whether you're staff, like Melanie. Melanie's another chaplain, by the way, if you didn't know, down the road, just started with us this year. Melanie and Kirsten as chaplains as well. Team members must be 18 years of age and older. How old are you guys?
19.
Okay, I thought you'd be older, just checking. So a team leader is the SU Queensland Event Director, so that's Andrew Stores, is your team leader. Your coordinator is the SU Queensland staff member who oversees and ensures that the programs and events in their area are operating as they should under the guideline, which is me. And our risk management officer is the person who looks at, who monitors everything we do across the state, sets the agenda for the training and putting these training modules together, and actually looks at the risk assessments that we've done for a whole range of activities that camp directors can use, so they don't have to write them all themselves, they can just take them and adapt them to the context that they're using them in. So we've got a whole department in Brisbane that looks at camps and events and program development, and there's a team of people that look at this stuff all the time. So they're on top of legislative changes and that type of stuff. To give you an example, a couple of years ago the government made changes to the Maritime Safety Act, I think it was called, that meant that we could no longer use volunteers and do things like water skiing, tubing, jet skiing and those types of things, motorised water sports. So we had a programs department that worked with the government and talked with them about how that impacts on our events and whether we could get some processes in place that would still allow us to do that without the volunteers and boat owners and people have to go out and get a commercial licence to actually undergo those two activities. We've actually just got an email yesterday to say that that whole sphere is actually now taken over by the federal government. We've got to start the whole process from scratch. So we've actually had to suspend all of those things again for this next camping season over these next holidays. We can't run any of those activities, and hopefully we'll sort that through for summer. So, we've got a whole team that look at all of those types of things, legislative requirements and so forth. So it's a hierarchical system, so you are accountable to the people above you in this context of a camp. So as team leaders, you're accountable to Andrew as the camp director. Andrew is actually accountable to me for how the whole program runs, and I'm accountable to the whole department up there that oversees the ministry programming side of what we do as well, to make sure that, you know, in my checks and all that sort of stuff, that I've made sure that certain things have happened and will happen in terms of how the camp is run. Get you to look at pages 4 and 5 in your little child safe booklet. I won't go through this in a huge amount of detail, but there's two little text boxes here. This one here is expectations, and we talked a little bit about this already. This is expectations of the, this one's for you. Expectations of you. So, you know, we've talked a little bit about being willing to serve, looking out for the well-being and holistic growth of the children. Up on the top of page 5 is another box of expectations, and that's the expectations that you have of us actually putting on the event. So it's reasonable that you have some expectations of some things that we do. So that's what I want to just very quickly go over. You have or should have a reasonable expectation that we give you information about who we are as an organisation. So hence the first part we started with was looking at SU and who we are, what we do. You should have a reasonable expectation that we can help you understand your role, and I hope that this process will do that. And the meetings you have with Andrew too are part of that. Ensure you know to whom you are accountable. So you are all accountable to Andrew as the event director. That you can expect support and supervision in your role, and again on the actual camp itself, that's with Andrew. Ensure that you have a supportive and safe working environment. Arrange appropriate and reasonable insurances. We do that on your behalf. So the paperwork that you've had to fill out about being a volunteer and all those types of things that you've had to provide for us help us make sure that everyone's appropriately covered by insurance. Inform you of and consult with you on matters affecting you, and provide orientation and initial and ongoing training applicable to your role. This also applies to work environments too, so the context is a little bit different. So whilst we have some expectations of what you will do on a camp as a volunteer, you know, it's reasonable that you have some expectations on us and the types of things that you know, we need to do to actually support you in that role as well. So that's what that was talking about. All right, let's have a look. Again, that's not enough. I'm not quite sure what that is. Oh, sorry, that's the responsibility flow and the accountability back the other way. All right, let's have a look. First of all, we're talking about safe people. So everybody who comes on a camp should have filled out a volunteer application form. Is there anyone who hasn't done that?
But the chaplain.
The chaplains, no, you don't have to do that.
Sort of, we're still waiting for a reference.
Okay, great. So that's in process. Everyone needs to have blue cards. I'm sure you do, or you shouldn't be sitting here this morning. As part of that, you need to have referees as part of that volunteer application. Again, you've gone through an employment process, so that's a little bit different for you guys. You should have sat down with Andrew as the director, at least had some type of interview, however formal or informal that may be. When we know each other, it's a little bit easier. You should have undertaken some training, which is what we're here about today, and you should understand some of the policies and procedures that protect people. And again, that's what we're going through today. Safe activities. Okay, so as well as having safe people, it's about having safe activities, and we operate, I guess, on a 6P of safe activities. So prior preparation and planning preventative performance. So Andrew, as the director, should have a program that's spelt out, and there's other elements of the program that you know, he should have looked at in detail to make sure that everything's okay. For example, risk assessments for the activities that you're doing and that type of thing. All right. It's important, we've got a duty of care to the kids who are coming on the camp, so it's important that we actually make sure that the activities that we've planned for them to do, whilst they might be fun, they're also safe. All sorts of fun stuff we can do that may not necessarily be safe, we need to make sure that the ones we operate in are safe. And that includes also, I guess, reflecting and debriefing on activities as well to work out was it safe, and identifying issues that we can maybe improve as well. So that's part of the process. Okay, what should we consider when planning an activity? Great question, I'm glad you asked. I should do a bit of a brainstorm just very quickly in the room. What are some of the things you think we should consider when we're planning an activity?
Age appropriate.
Age appropriateness. Yep. The goal. What the goal of the activity is? Yeah. Why are we doing it? Is it just for fun, or are we looking for a particular outcome at the end?
Different ability levels between.
Different ability levels and participants. Fantastic.
Whether we have the resources or the space or the equipment.
Yep. So have I actually got the proper equipment to do the activity that I want to run?
Is that equipment in safe condition?
That's right. Yep. All right. So we talked a little bit about participants, age appropriateness, ability levels. Okay. The team. Do we have the actual team of people that are qualified to run this? The equipment. Do we have the correct equipment? Is it in working order? The venue. Okay. Is the environment that we're going to run the activity in safe? So those types of things are all there. Have a flip to page 34 and 35 in your little book here. And that actually provides you with a checklist. A checklist of different questions that you can ask for actually planning a safe activity, for the overall activity, for the participants. So the size of the group is another one. Special needs. What do you do with kids who don't want to participate? Okay, if you've got leaders supervising the activity and it's taken all of your leaders, but there's some kids who don't want to participate, how do you manage that? So again, that's thinking through the scenario that not everyone may feel comfortable participating. So you've got to have adequate leaders to actually make sure you've got something to do with them. So I won't go through all of those in the list. I'll let you have a look through those. So a whole lot of little tick boxes there that you can go through: participants, team, equipment, and venue. To make sure that, okay, we've thought about some of the issues that we need to think about for running this particular activity. Any questions? Okay, can I get you to click over to page 37. All the way through to 56. Okay. Those three sections, okay, you've got C3 specific situations, safe environments, what's the fifth one? Health and first aid, and then incidents. All of those things there, highly recommend that you actually read that section in detail before you go on camp, because that talks a lot about different situations and how you actually respond to them. I'll talk about some of them briefly, but in terms of water-based activities, different first aid scenarios, how you would respond to a kid that had head lice, for instance, or conjunctivitis and those types of things. So I'm not going to go through that in detail this morning, but if you can have a look. So there's a few key things within that to look at. Okay, infection. If a kid is sick before they come on camp and you're aware of it, mum's run up and said the kid's got the flu. Okay, sorry, you probably can't come on camp.
That makes sense. What happens if they arrive and mum hasn't called you?
Well, I mean, you're quite. Well, then with the camp director, you make a decision about whether you think it's appropriate for that child to stay. And you may need to give them a call to say, look, you probably need to come and collect Johnny until he can come back and connect in on day 3 if he's okay or whatever. Sometimes they're difficult conversations to have if mum really wants you out of the house for the week, but you've got to look at the safety of the whole camp and the event in its entirety as well.
That would apply to team members too.
Yeah, absolutely.
If one of us
Absolutely.
get the flu.
Yeah, that's right.
But you're okay, you've already had it.
The other really big one is actually water safety. So that's a really big issue. You need to have somebody that's got a minimum of bronze medallion supervising water-based activities. And there are a whole heap of protocols involved in terms of doing safe water activities. So you encourage you to have a look through those as well. Safety during transportation is another big issue. If you're transporting kids, generally it'll be by a bus. Some cases it's private cars, depending on the context of the camp. So you need to make sure, you've got all your protocols there. The bus driver, the bus company that you're using, do their drivers have blue cards, all of those, types of things. And the other biggie is, food handling legislation and health and safety practices as well. Using gloves, getting people who've got, there's a particular qualification or ticket that people preparing and handling food need to have as well. So have a look at those. Andrew is a director, should have be on the ball for making sure those types of
Jamie's
boxes
done the
and
food
things.
handling course.
And
Jenny's
those
done the
types of
bronze medallion.
And so it's Ray, I think.
Yep.
Brett's
Good to
a
hear.
canoeing instructor, qualified canoeing instructor with lifesaving certificate for that. So.
Fantastic. Yep. So that's the type of things that we expect to put in place, which they are, which is wonderful.
And Gavin, at the SU induction, we were told as chaplains not to transport students in their car at all,
Yes.
at any given time, so.
Yes, that's right. This is a different context. Okay, essentially you're on this camp as a volunteer. It's slightly different rules. I don't think you guys have buses for what we're doing anyway, don't you? But for transporting students?
For the day we have transport, we have a bus big enough to carry nearly everyone. They're giving us a smaller bus this year, so some leaders may be in a car, but all the kids will be up there. It's a 45-seat bus. We've got 39 kids, 37 kids, plus Jana and Chelsea if but they'll probably go with mum and dad anyway, our kitchen.
So see, it's a different context. So for example, if you've got on a bus trip down to the beach stuff, and a kid cuts their foot on a bit of glass and he has to be taken to hospital, well, the person who's got their car there will need to, with another leader, transport them to hospital. So, there's...
And so the fact that we're volunteers covers us, basically.
It's a different context.
And when parents have registered their children to come, they're asked the question, can your child, or do you give permission for your child to go and leave his car? If
So
need be. I think there's one that said no, the rest have said yes.
But it's probably good to know who that one is.
Yeah.
Mind you, if you're faced with an emergency situation,
Surely
you've got to act in the best interest of the kid, okay, sorry, I can't take him in the car, I'm going to wait for we'll get the bus.
Yeah.
You've got to take common sense actions like that as well.
Yeah.
Right. So, on the course of the camp, we're running activities, whether it's water-based activity or games or whatever. From time to time, things happen. All right. So there's two types of things that can happen. First is an accident. An accident is an undesired event that results in harm. Okay. So people will get hurt, property is damaged, program is disrupted, or a combination of those things. So generally speaking, they're things that we didn't plan on it happening. It's just happened. Okay, it's an accident. An incident. And there's actually something that happens from that. Okay, there's an injury or something else. An incident is an undesired event which could have resulted in harm or damage. Okay, so it's important to understand the difference between those. So it might be near miss. So if we were doing, we run a schoolers event up in the Sundays where the kids do 4 days on Long Island and 3 days on a charter boat, bareboat charters. All right. So if we've got some kids on a boat and through the course of it, they get involved in raising sails and all that sort of stuff, and boom, hits the kid in the head, okay, and causes an injury, okay, we've got an accident. Okay, that would be an accident. If we've got something that happened and there's a rope snaps and the boom does a big thing, everyone ducks, okay, and misses. All right, we've got an incident. We document that, but there's actually been no harm, but it could have resulted in harm. Okay, so there's two different definitions of accidents. Causes of accidents are unsafe conditions. Okay, if you're going to take these kids, the idea of the kids whitewater rafting. All right, to use an extreme example, or let's use the example of the beach. Okay, you're going to the beach. You guys swim between the flags. It's safe, but let's say it wasn't a patrol beach, and you've got a 30 knot southeasterly breeze and one and a half metre swell, and there's unsafe conditions, right? You can't send a kid in there.
Strong wind.
Using the extreme example.
Absolutely.
Okay, it's unsafe conditions. If you allow someone in there, the unsafe conditions potentially could cause an accident.
Absolutely.
Right? More than likely will. Somebody might do something silly, such as standing in a boat, if it's a canoe, hitting somebody else with an oar, right? Silly things happen. Kids do dumb things. Adults do dumb things at times. Or an error of judgment as well. Okay, putting a little kid who's this high, 30 kilos, wringing wet, on the end of a rope, whatever, can't remember the term, supporting another kid who's rock climbing. Okay, that's an error of judgment. That's not the right kid to be engaged in that activity. So accidents are usually caused by one of those three things. The conditions themselves are unsafe, people have done something that's unsafe, or there's been an error of judgment in terms of the planning or the actual running of the activity. Okay, when more of one of those is present, the likelihood of an accident is much greater. Okay? So if we have unsafe conditions, okay, a huge swell, an error of judgment, you let the kids go in, an unsafe act, while the kids are out there, they're playing games where they're holding each other underwater. You put all of those different things together, okay, you've got a real problem here in the middle, those things combining are more than likely going to create an accident. The risk is just magnified considerably. So we need to be thinking about the conditions, what people are actually doing, and making good decisions based on all of the factors, the age of the kids, the conditions, equipment, facilities, all of those things. As part of what we do for all of our camps, we have risk management plans for a whole range of different activities. And when our camp directors put together programs, they can access those risk management plans, and they should have risk management plans for each of those activities, and we can adjust those for to suit the exact context of what we're looking at as well. So the activity leader before the events needs to obtain those risk management plans for the activities from your event. So as a leader on the camp, you should have those risk management plans for the activities, and if you're responsible for running one of those activities, you need to be familiar with the risk management plan for that activity. All right? Andrew carries the can, he needs to have the understanding of all of them, but for the activity that you run, you actually need to make sure you understand those, and make sure not only that you've got it and that you understand it, you have to make sure you implement it. Okay, it's no good saying, okay, this is the risk management plan, okay, I understand what I need to do, but then you go out and run the activity and you fly by the seat of your pants and take it as it comes, okay, because that's when you'll get an error of judgment, okay, someone will do something stupid, an unsafe act, and bang, all of a sudden you've got an accident, okay. So you need to make sure you understand what the protocols are for the different activities that you are running. Any questions?
We'll have those in separate folders for each activity. So once Brett's finished them, we'll put them in a folder. If you're responsible for an activity, we'll give them to you.
Prior to the camp.
Yeah, well, it depends on Brett, I think.
Well,
We'll do it then.
I did them all last year and they're all the same with the minor exceptions.
So
So
Brett's looking at them, isn't he? That's
yeah,
his job,
he and I have spoken about them.
Yeah.
So he should be on that. He was going to come, well, he should be in 5 minutes. So he and I could have a look at that type of thing. Only we call them safety management plans.
Right.
Because that's what my director calls it. So,
That's fine. Same thing. As long as we
we
don't
print them out, it says safety management. Okay.
All right. Doesn't matter how much you plan. Okay. Sometimes something will happen. All right. It's just one of those things that we do all the planning and preparation that we can. We implement safety management plans, risk management plans. We run activities according to the established protocols, but sometimes things still happen. All right. And sometimes they're left field things as well. It might not just be an activity, it might be something innocuous, someone slipping in the shower, discovering that someone's brought drugs to a camp, deal with that one, those types of things. So when things happen, we need to respond in an appropriate manner. Okay? Something's happened, all right, we've done all the planning, but it happens, now we've got to respond. What do we actually do? Okay, we have the flow chart, which I'll go through in a little bit. But I'll just quickly run through this first. Actually, I'll come to that sheet at the end, actually. The first responder is the activity leader. So whoever it is that's actually running the particular activity, more than likely one of you guys. I don't think you guys are running activities much, are you? Okay. So the person in your team of leaders who has taken responsibility for the activity, that is the activity leader. This is just defining some of the people. The event director, Andrew, who's in charge of the whole camp. There's the emergency response coordinator, which is an SU staff member trained in emergency situations. Okay, I am one of those people. Whether I am actually your ER coordinator for this camp, I don't know yet, because we allocate different people to clusters of camps or individual camps, depending on who's on holidays and who's not, and who's available and where it is in the state and so on. So it could be me, it could be somebody else. Have you received info yet? Who you're?
No, I normally get an email, but I haven't had that
it
yet.
must be still coming out. I haven't seen it either. And the SU coordinator. So the ER coordinator and the SU coordinator could be the one person, right? So I am the SU coordinator for your area, but I might not necessarily be the ER coordinator. I could be. I could be playing both roles. All right. So
I don't like ringing them.
what is an emergency situation? Okay.
Maybe, Andrew?
It could be a serious vehicle accident. All right. We have never had a death of a participant on one of our programs. We've had some serious situations at times, but we've never had a death. Praise God. We have a lost participant. Okay, and there's some definitions around that, which you'll find in your book too.
45 minutes, wasn't it?
It's something like that. Okay, that's an emergency. A significantly injured participant is an emergency. A natural tragedy. Okay, something happens. A freak storm comes in, blows over a tree.
Yep.
That type of stuff. Significant violence, either between participants or somebody has come on to a site and done something to somebody. A sexual assault. A suicidal participant. Okay, so an attempted or actual suicide. Okay, again, we probably never have one of those. I'll just go back. Or the police have been involved in your program, such as when we discovered somebody had brought drugs with them on a camp. Okay, those situations are we could definitely describe as an emergency situation. Any form of abuse or disclosure of abuse that occurs is an emergency situation as well. So as you journey with people and people feel comfortable with you, they recognise you're in a safe place. Kids sometimes disclose information to you that would constitute an abuse. It might not actually be happening, but it might be either disclosed that it has happened, or when I go home, Uncle John's going to be there, and this is what he does to me. That's a disclosure. An occurrence of self-harm, cutting is the most common one that you might find. Probably not so much on a primary camp.
Haven't heard of any.
No, it happens. So it does happen. An outbreak of disease. This has happened in different places.
First camp.
In time. Extensive food poisoning. Hopefully that doesn't happen. That's why we've got other protocols in place for that. Possibility of spinal, back or head injury. Someone's had a fall. Someone's had a collision with another person or something. Eye damage. Sticks in eyes. Someone's unconscious. Or there's been an inappropriate physical contact between participants. So that's expanding a bit more on what we were talking about earlier. And between leaders and students too, would come into that. Okay, so on those instances, you would, is when you would contact your emergency response coordinator. Those things would be deemed as an emergency.
Yes, so we wouldn't report that disclosure ourselves to the department, we'd phone you guys.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Yeah. So situations for your SU coordinator. So this is not so much an emergency situation, but an incident or an accident that would be reported. And again, this is all goes through Andrew too, which we'll look at. So minor bullying between participants or unacceptable behaviour. I've sent kids home from camp before because their behaviour's been unacceptable and they're going to pose a danger to themselves and other people. An injury that may require medical attention but is relatively minor, still need to notify people appropriately. So for example, a broken arm, something like that. And this is how we respond. Okay, so you've got that flowchart in front of you. So you are, so up the top there, you're the activity leader. All right, you have run an activity and you have, this is a tragedy situation. So you've got a tragedy over here. So this is the big ticket ones we're talking about here. So death, unconscious team member or participant, vehicle accident, serious personal injury, actually a broken limb would probably fall under more so than the other. A natural tragedy, lost member, so greater than 45 minutes. Okay, you've been unable to account for somebody for 45 minutes. Okay, we now click into emergency response mode. Okay, because 45 minutes are keeping you a long way from where they need to be in 45 minutes. So you need to contact, well, first of all, don't talk to the media. Okay, it's not your job to respond if an accident happens and all of a sudden you've got a film crew standing on outside the camp. It's not your responsibility to talk to them. You need to be focused on the care of the participants that are remaining and the care of the student who has been injured or whatever. All right? But you do need to contact emergency services. If you've got somebody, don't hesitate. Ring an ambulance. Ring 000. Okay? If you've got a serious issue. You also need to immediately let the director of the event know. So if it's a camp where you've got activities that are away from the main campsite where you're operating, then your camp director may not always be exactly with you. Okay, he might be somewhere else, doing something else. you need to notify them. So at all times you need to be able to know where your event director is so you can contact your event director. One of the reasons we have ratios of leaders to kids of 3:1 is so that in emergency situations there's enough leaders there that can handle the emergency, continue to handle the rest of the participants and manage them because they might be traumatised or upset or might not be to that extreme, but you still need to have supervision of those, right? And if we have to then accompany students to hospital and all sorts of things, we need to make sure we've got enough leaders to actually accommodate that and still maintain the rest of the program if it's appropriate, if the rest of the program is maintained, or at least manage the rest of the program until such time as kids can get home, all right? So you manage the situation until the event director arrives. So if something occurs, let Andrew know, let Andrew know. Andrew will go immediately to where that is, whether it's in the next room or on another site, off-site. You need to make sure you secure the safety of the group. Remove them from danger, check and secure any equipment, occupy the group of students that you have remaining away from the accident site. So that may be next room, it might be 50 metres down here, but you still need to obviously be with the participant that is having the issue, but you need to remove those students from the proximity of the accident, okay? Because you don't want them hanging around, getting more and more upset, feeling like they want to get involved and help and all those types of things. They need to be occupied appropriately over here. Kick in another activity with them, with the remaining leaders, whatever you need to do, basically. You need to maintain contact with the director until he or she arrives at the site of the tragedy or organised place. So it may be that he's going to meet you out at the hospital, it may be that he's going to meet you at the site. You ring that event director every 10 minutes to update them on what is happening. Okay, it may only be a 10-second call, but you need to maintain contact with your event director so that he's fully informed the whole way along of what the present situation is. Okay, the kid's in more pain, the ambulance has just arrived, and so on. Once the camp director arrives, he takes over. He may still ask you to be involved in that situation, but the responsibility shifts from you to him. He's now in charge of the situation, okay? So we go over to the middle here. The event director then kicks in. Again, he doesn't talk to the media either. His job is to make sure that everybody's safe, the remaining participants are safe, that the injured person or the lost person or whatever, that's getting the appropriate focus it needs from leadership as well. The event director then immediately contacts the SU Queensland Emergency Response. He would probably do that while he's on his way there if he's got to drive a distance to get to somewhere. Okay, so that should have already started happening. When he gets to where you are, he will talk to you to determine what your needs are. Okay, what resources do you need? Do we need to get counsellors out here to talk with the rest of the kids? Do we need to provide additional resources here? Do we need to organise another bus to get here and get these other kids back to wherever we're going? All of those types of things. He will work with the activity leaders regarding. He'll travel to the appropriate place and manage the situation until the emergency response coordinator arrives as well. He will maintain contact with the emergency response coordinator until he or she arrives at the site of the tragedy or an organised place, such as the hospital. Right. When the event director contacts the emergency response coordinator, and this is actually probably interesting to know, I'll backtrack a little. Once you as an activity leader ring your event director, whether he's physically present with you or not, he's now in charge. That's one of the other reasons you've got to continue ringing him every 10 minutes. Okay? You might be physically in charge of the physical location and what's happening, but ultimately he's been notified, he's in charge. He'll continue to communicate with you in terms of how things are going. As soon as he contacts the emergency response coordinator, he's subject to the direction of the emergency response coordinator and is obligated to continue communicating with that person. So the emergency response coordinator, if that's me, that's assuming it is, okay, I will decide with the director on the appropriate level of response to the incident, okay? So he and I together will make that call. What do we need to do here? Right? I will decide with the director, appropriate person to contact parents, because we need to do that as soon as possible. Okay? There is nothing that will get us into more trouble than waiting 2 or 3 hours to actually notify a parent that their kid's just broken their leg. Alright? We need to do that as soon as we possibly can, and we will negotiate between myself and Andrew who is the best person to do that. Okay? Is Andrew so taken up with managing the situation that it's better for me to do that, or is it relatively under control? He knows the parent, so he will do that. So we'll negotiate who responds that way. So whether that's the camp director, the coordinator, it could be the CEO or authorities, depending on the nature of the issue. We may not want to engage with the parents at all. We want to manage whatever's going on. Okay, so it may be that as emergency response coordinator, I call our critical response unit. We have a group of 3 people at every camping season are on call, on a critical response team, who will get on a plane and get anywhere they can as soon as they can within the state to help manage a situation if they're needed. So we're talking about, a bareboat charter, they've lost track of 1 kid, okay, a death, those types of, critical incident type things. I will then coordinate our response team in consultation with that critical incident team. So whether or not that critical incident team makes a decision that they need to be physically present or not, I will still work with them to work out our response. Okay? Do we need counsellors to come in? Do we need to replace the director and or the leaders because it's a traumatic event, and after everything is wrapped up, it's not appropriate for it's a big serious issue. We need to make sure we're looking after our people, and we continue with different leaders in place, we make a decision to shut it down and send everybody home. All right? We wouldn't do that immediately because we want to try and have some sort of appropriate response with the remaining participants and try and debrief them and prepare them for what's happened and talk with that. So we would manage that whole process in terms of what the response is. And as the ER coordinator, I will immediately, on contacted, travel to the site as well, if it's appropriate. I mean, not all situations will require me to be going there and be physically present, but often they would. And so every half an hour, I will be in contact with the event director, working out where we're at in terms of the situation. A lot to take in on that, I know. Does anyone have any questions for me in terms of what our response is? Do you all understand what your role is in an emergency situation?
Do we have a first aider who's responsible for administering first aid, or is it basically you're there?
You would, if they're on site, yes.
That's you?
That's me. And we have a number of female leaders with senior first aid certificates as well, so we're covered.
That's right. So there's someone there that is, that responds.
Yeah.
Yep. You obviously make common sense decisions to keep people safe and respond appropriately to the situation. Alright.
And we'll have a medication kit as well, first aid kit and a medication person.
Yes.
Like
Yep.
Excellent.
Yeah, so anyone who's on any type of medication has to hand that in, and that's monitored. The other one that we actually mentioned is overdose of drugs and or medicines. That can happen at times as well. Feel free to jump up and grab something too. I'm nearly finished this section. Actually, let me just finish this section and then we'll break for a good 5 minutes. And we're probably more than halfway through then. Okay, how can you help a child through the traumatic situation? Let me just quickly put these up. You need to make sure they feel safe. Okay, so what do you need to do to ensure the child feels safe? It might be removing others, removing the danger. Okay, what is the immediate need? Is it first aid? Is it comfort? Is it removal from the situation that they're into another physical rotation? You reunite the child with their family. That's why we do contact as soon as possible. I'd suggest within the first half an hour, parents need to know. Obviously, you're not going to do it immediately because you're responding to the situation. You care for the person first, but parents need to be contacted, and that will either happen, as I mentioned, by Andrew or myself. Communicate with the child. So keep talking with them. You're okay. This is what's happening. You're waiting for the ambulance. You know, you're going to be okay. There's people here. Everyone else is safe. You don't need to worry about them. So you're constantly communicating with the child about what's going on, reassuring them about what's happening. Involve them as well. You know, it's not all about you responding. How are you feeling? What do you need? Are you comfortable? Do you need to move in another position? You know, those types of things. Accept regressive behaviour. All right. If you're in an emergency situation, kids are kids. They're going to respond in a whole range of different ways. They could be angry. They could be teary. They could be just screaming. They could be hyperventilating. You know, they're going to respond as kids respond, unpredictably and in all sorts of different ways. Accept that. That's not a behavioural problem. At this point, you're dealing with an emergency. We're not worried about the behaviour of the kid. Okay, we're worried about getting them safe, getting them treatment if we need to, all that sort of stuff. Protect the child from exposure to the media. Okay, you know, if that involves getting a group of leaders to stand around if you're in a public place, holding up towels, shield them from that. They don't need to be worried about whatever else is happening around them. Okay, I'm sure parents don't want to see their kid on the 6 o'clock news on the beach with a broken leg. I mean, you know, take appropriate steps to make sure they're not being exposed to the media at all. All right. That's the end of, I guess, the safe activities section. Any questions from that? This is probably the heaviest sort of part of what we do. It's really just making sure you're aware of what your role is and how things work in terms of a problem. Any other questions?
So basically, if Andrew's not present, we just phone him straight away on our phones, don't we?
Yep.
Contact him.
So you should have, all leaders should have Andrew's phone number and each other's while you're on camp as well, contact. Most of the time, you'll all be at one spot. Okay, so generally speaking, that's how it will roll. He'll be there within 2 minutes walk if there's an activity down this end of the beach and that and so on. So generally, it'll be close by, in which case all of these things will kick in pretty quickly in terms of you notify Andrew, hearing the name, hearing parents, emergency, all that sort of stuff.
Excellent.
It's more just when, you know, a
It
camp.
happens to be busy.
Yeah, like some camps run electives for different kids, and they'll do archery over here, canoeing over here, and off-site shopping over here. They could be in all sorts of places. So that's when, obviously, the logistics get a little bit more complicated.
Very good.
All right, let's have a break, and Andrew's got some stuff there for us to eat, which is fantastic. We'll break for 5 or so minutes. And then I'll try and really roll through the rest of it relatively quickly, because a lot of it you can read up yourself on the notes. It's not too intense. So.
Wow. I just had visions then of all these tragedies.
Look, and it happens rarely, but accidents do happen.
And you do have to be prepared, hey?
You do have to be prepared.
You've got to talk
Absolutely.
about it.
I've only ever had to call an ambulance once.
Which was for?
A boy who decided to land fairly heavily on the back of his head on a slip and slide.
Oh, yes.
Good, mate.
We actually had one about 3 weeks ago where the leader of the camp tripped and injured her knee in the first 10 minutes of being there.
Oh, no.
And so she got sent off in the ambulance.
How would you be?
And again, that's why we have the ratio of kids.
I think that's excellent. Yeah.
The other thing is, look,
One to
in 20
three
years
slides.
doing first aid for camps and things like that, things are going to happen. You have some camps where you don't have anything. other camps where you run off your feet
Bit of
sometimes.
activity happening,
But
yeah.
it's generally speaking, mostly it's normally just the little things. That's like 9
Little
times.
pats and things.
Yeah, about 99% of the time it's all pretty much just the minor.
Yeah.
You get that 0.1 or 1%, which is just going to happen.
Yeah, they pats and stuff happen at school all the time.
But the one I had
If you
to
look at the critical incident team that we have,
it was going to happen.
most years our critical incident team doesn't actually meet every school. So it has, as I said, we've never had a death, and most years there is no need to use it. Most camping seasons will have emergencies that we respond to.
Okay.
It's very rare to go through
Gold coins for
camping
coffee
season
here.
without anything, but
Machine there, Mark's there, we'll just throw them in the dishwasher and we'll wash them up like that.
Hello. So Andrew, you're meeting with a separate group of people in LA?
Yeah, and these guys are supposed to join us when they're done. Just we're running a touch. I have 6 male leaders,
haven't got my card yet.
and I have
They're on their way. I've got emails to say they're coming.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and a junior, and a junior, and a Jenny.
So practically 12 if they do.
Oh yeah, well, Jenny's co-directing, but that's because I gave her a name of co-director. She's doing spiritual input. Brett is another hanger-oner. He's canoeing lifesaving and activities, charging activities. Because if Tim didn't get his act together, I had Brett as a leader playing.
Actually, what I want to do, most of the rest of what the presentation is pretty much on the notes. I think that it's probably more valuable for you guys.